Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Kansas City Royals. We are at the beginning of the 2030 to 2031 offseason. Royals got back into the playoffs in the 2030 season, won the AL Central. We won a wild card series against the Baltimore Orioles, but then dropped a best-of-5 series in Game 5 to the Red Sox. Former Royals pitcher Zach Willeman really came back to haunt us in the series. Won Game 5, and the Red Sox also won Game 1 of the series in which he pitched. So not an optimal finish to the season, but glad that we still went for it because it's going to be a very different looking team next year. Bobby Whit Jr. has voided his last contract year with us, so we're going to have a huge decision to make with him this offseason. But apparently the $27 million player option was not enough, so he's looking for much more than that. And in this episode, we're going to obviously focus on what we want to potentially try to do with Bobby Witt Jr. We still have an option year decision on catcher MJ Melendez. We're going to focus on arbitration, and we are also, most importantly, going to do a recap of our performance of the 2030 season. But before we get to any of that, we do have a team trainer opening again. Those of you who have been paying close attention will know that we've been going year to year with trainers for the last several seasons just because we haven't found anyone all that exciting. Hoping we can find someone a little better this off-season who we can maybe lock up for a few years, but we'll see. Basically, we've been trying to avoid, you see all these legendary arm prevention trainers, but you see all these red ratings where they're poor or fair, and we've been trying to at least avoid trainers who have those traits this year. And actually there's a decent trainer out there, not great, but Mel Maxey, you can see he's excellent at preventing leg and arm and injuries, good at preventing back, outstanding preventing other, and excellent with fatigue recovery. He's only average in rehabbing legs, but outstanding in arms, excellent in back, and legendary in rehab other. So he's a pretty good trainer. He's not a Rick Jameson for those who have been playing this game for years, but or is Rick Jameson a scout? I can't even remember anymore, but Rick Jameson was awesome, whatever he was. But I'm going to try to make a longer-term offer to Maxey. Kind of hate having to find a new trainer every year, and he's kind of the only one of these people who's good or better in preventing arm injuries who doesn't have at least one, if not many, ratings where he's fair or poor. Average is the worst he is, and he's only average at rehabbing legs. Everything else, he's good, excellent, outstanding, or legendary. So he's a pretty good trainer. So we are going to try to bring him on board, looking for $470,000 for 4 years. Let's see if we can give him $400,000 a year and just lock him up for 5. So we will make an offer to Mel Maxey on that front and hopefully have a trainer locked up for the longish term. Turning to a view of the front office, as the offseason begins, the Royals are in really good shape financially. You can see we've got about $54, $55, $56 million to spend on free agents and extensions. Largely, that's driven by the fact that Bobby Witt Jr. opted out of his player option, and our best starting pitcher, Spencer Bauer, is also going to be a free agent, along with Tim Anderson, Rafael Devers, who we picked up in a big trade before the trade deadline, R.J. Dabovich, Luke Murphy, who we picked up in a trade deadline trade, and Josh Young, who we picked up about a year and a half ago, are all free agents. So a lot of money coming off the books for the Royals, but we're also going to be potentially losing a lot of talent on this roster, which isn't optimal. The good news is we had a pretty profitable 2030, and that has led our ownership to kind of get us back on the path of an increased budget. We had a really steady progression, managing our finances really well, working well with ownership, and getting more and more money to spend every year until last season, when we had kind of a slower year, missed the playoffs for the first time in several years, and had our budget cut back. But for next year, it's going to jump up by $18 million from $202 million to $220 million. So that definitely helps a little bit. We're probably going to actually put up the scouting budgets and the development budget ultimately. But as we head into free agency, we just want as much flexibility as possible. So we'll put them kind of at the lowest level that we would think about being at for next season. Player development, we're actually in pretty good shape right now. Really just luck. Well, not luck, but Maxime De La Cruz was a scouting discovery this past July. He's viewed as the number one prospect in baseball. Incredible personality. Looks like he could have a really good bat. The reason that I say that that's not entirely luck is that we have built our team to have a scouting director, Travis Lee, who is outstanding at international scouting. And as I was just talking about, we also put the biggest portion of our budget, 45%, into international scouting, and we also have a pretty significant scouting budget of $20 million. So we are kind of doing everything possible to try to ensure that we can unearth players like Maxime De La Cruz at a more frequent rate than most teams out there that either don't have as good an international scout or aren't investing as much in scouting overall and international scouting in particular. So that should help us find more players like him over time, which is a relatively small market team, is something we're definitely going to need to do. Taking a look at the performance on the field of the Royals last year, obviously 92-70, won the AL Central. Once again, had the best pitching staff in the American League, first in runs allowed, allowing just 601 runs this season. Over the past 6 or 7 years, we have often had the number one pitching staff in the AL and pretty consistently been one of the top handful of pitching staffs in the American League. No different this year. You can see we're first, second, or third in almost all the pitching categories. Pretty good fielding team also. Offense was a bit of an issue for us. You can see third, seventh, fifth, seventh, fifth, kind of in the top half of the league in just about all pitching categories except for home runs and walks. But overall, we were seventh in runs scored, so definitely middle of the pack in the American League in runs scored with 716. But when you only allow 601, that lets you put up a pretty good record. So not going to have to make wholesale changes to the team in a perfect world. The issue is kind of that the wholesale changes are being made to us with the likely loss of our top player in Bobby Whit Jr. and our top starting pitcher in Spencer Bauer. In turning to that top player, Bobby Whit Jr., you can see that he led the Royals with a 6.2 WAR this past season, 149 games played, did lead the league with 108 runs, 23 homers, 74 runs driven in, stole 42 bases, hit 280, good for a 124 OPS plus, and as I mentioned, that 6.2 WAR, so a very solid season once again for the 30-year-old. You can see he won the MVP award in that wild card series for us against the Orioles. Looking at his batting profile, still an above-average offensive player with that good contact, decent gap power, plus home run power, and still a very good defensive player. The decision we have to make, though, is that, as I mentioned, he opted out of that $27 million final year to his contract, and now he's looking for an average of close to $36 million a year for the next 7 years, which will take him through his age 37 season. And we've got to be honest about what Bobby Whit Jr. is. He is a very good player. You can see his 162 game average, 278 hitter, 27 homers, 106 runs scored, 100 ribbies, very efficient base stealer, on average 35 steals and 5 caught stealings over 162 games. And he's put up a 122 OPS plus over the course of his career with an average WAR of 6 over 162 games. So he's never won an MVP award. I don't know if I would call him a Yeah, I guess with 5 All-Star appearances in 9 seasons, is that a perennial All-Star? Maybe on the borderline. But is he a $36 million a year player? He's probably not. Now, he's extremely popular, so re-signing him would be a big bonus for the Royals. Would keep us from taking a huge hit if both him and Bauer were to leave to fan interest. So he is definitely in the mix of players that we want to consider bringing back, obviously. But I don't know that he's a $35-36 million a year player in his mid-30s. I'm not playing with inflation, so the salaries are kind of, or exactly the same as they were in 2022 in terms of kind of team budgeting and what people should be paid. And a $35-36 million a year player is, probably one of the top 10 players in baseball. And although Bobby Witt Jr. is a very good player and probably on the path to the Hall of Fame, if he can play for another decade, you can see he's got 1,433 hits here at the age of 33, 837 runs, 211 homers, 788 runs batted in. It's hard to imagine that he's going to double all of those figures. The career batting average of 278 certainly doesn't stand out, but he's got an outside shot at 3,000 hits if he stays healthy. You can see he's had a fair number of years, 19, 18, 19 homers, where he doesn't even hit 20 home runs, but certainly could get to 400 home runs, certainly on pace to get to 500 steals, but presumably his speed will start breaking down a bit as he gets a little older. But he's led or tied for the league lead in stolen bases twice in his career and has pretty consistently been a 20-20 home run and steals kind of guy, having done that 6 times over the course of his career. The only 3 times he didn't were those 3 years I mentioned where he didn't reach 20 home runs. So got a big decision to make on him. I think he's probably technically not really worth the money that he's going to be looking for, but we may bring him back anyways. Like I said, big critical decision for the Royals this offseason. Fortunately, there's no critical decisions on Alex Vasquez for some time. Played his first full year this year and obviously had an incredible season, leading the league in doubles, runs batted in, batting average, slugging, OPS, and WRC+. Just a brilliant season from the 24-year-old. He is a DH primarily. He could play first base, left field, or right field in a pinch if we need him to. And with some prospective changes that we may be making, he could be moving into a more permanent left field role rather than a DH role. You can see this past season, 37 games at first, 13 in left, 10 at right. So he was primarily a designated hitter for us, but has an incredible bat, certainly a player that we're going to be looking to build around for the foreseeable future. Not yet eligible for arbitration, so he's only going to be making $700,000 next year. Have thought about trying to give him an extension. Right now he's looking for 10 years at an average of $18 million, which would buy out those arbitration years and some free agency years. The issue is that he's been pretty consistently looking for a player opt-out after the arbitration years are over, which from our perspective totally defeats the purpose of giving him more money over the next 5 years just so he can opt out, and we don't get any kind of free agent years locked up at a better value for him. So we'll continue talking throughout the offseason, I think, about a potential extension with him, particularly when we make some other big signings and kind of see where we look financially. If we don't make any big moves and we've got a huge load of money, could obviously try to give him a more front-loaded contract, which would be easier on the books in the out years. So a lot of options with Vasquez, but I think signing him to an extension is not the number one priority for us, even though he very well is probably going to be the AL Rookie of the Year. Would certainly be an upset for a season like the one he put together to not result in a Rookie of the Year award, and expect him to get some MVP votes also. Center fielder Luis Jose was third on the team in WAR, despite only playing 105 games. Picked him up 2 years ago with a trade for Boston, and that was a very costly trade for our team. We had to give up Zach Willeman, who we already mentioned, Scott Kobos, who is a very effective left-handed reliever, as well as Alex Collins and Jose Serrano, starting pitching prospects. But it was pretty costly to bring him on board, and he was productive each of the last 2 seasons with a 122 OPS plus in 70 games last year and a 121 OPS plus in the 105 games he played this year. Very good defensive center fielder. You know, the issue is he's fragile and he's always banged up. And even though he got the Red Sox to retain 30% of his contract, he's making $19.2 million a year for the next 5 years, which puts the Royals on the hook for over $13 million a year. So there is potential that we need to move on from him, even though he hit 280 with 13 homers and 47 ribbies in that limited action this year. The reason we may need to move on from him is because he makes so much money. And we have also brought up the 22-year-old, was 21 years old when he came up, Angelo Velasquez, who was our number 1 pick 2.5 years ago, 2 seasons ago. You can see profiles as an excellent contact hitter and a very good defensive center fielder, defensive outfielder in general. Hit just 253 and 170 at-bats, largely as a 21-year-old, so only a 79 OPS plus and a 78 WRC plus, but certainly profiles as a player who could be a plus offensive player for us and an excellent defensive center fielder. And given that we've got him making the minimum for the next couple years and then heading into arbitration, he is a much more cost-effective alternative to Luis Jose. So we may look to move on from Jose this offseason. The issue is that you look at how much we had to spend to get him, and shopping him around right now, not a ton of interest and not a ton of big-time offers. You can see the quality we're getting back from him is not generally great, and, 2.5-star starting pitcher Alexander Alberto with just brutal control, fantastic stuff, but making $10.3 million a year, bumping up to close to $16 million a year for the 2 out years on the contract. Really a kind of wacky pitcher, 122 innings pitched, struck out 175 but walked 82. Just extreme in terms of incredible off-the-chart stuff and basically the worst control you could possibly have in a major league pitcher. But Zach Veen, right fielder, another option, making $15 million next year, and you can see he profiles as, in a best-case scenario, kind of an average-ish offensive player, but he's coming off a year with just a 75 OPS plus. So we're getting offered players who are making really big money and aren't all that good, or guys in their late 20s, early 30s who are kind of minimum salary kind of players, but just not all that good. Toran O'Haran here, a starting pitcher, not all that interesting. And our old friend Zach Disenzo actually offered to us. You can see his batting profile continues to kind of deteriorate. He's fragile, injury proneness, is versatile defensively, and had a respectable year with Milwaukee last year, actually. 222 at-bats, kind of filling a utility infielder role similar to what he played for us years ago. Batted just 243, but with 18 homers and 222 at-bats. That let him put up a 130 OPS plus with all those homers and 13 doubles in that limited action. So there's options out there to get Jose's contract off of our books, but we're certainly not going to get the type of value in return that we had to give up for him just 2 years ago, which is unfortunate. But that's definitely something we are thinking about. Tim Anderson joined us for 1 year at shortstop. He is wrecked physically, likely to leave a hole. I think he's looking for pretty big money the last I looked. $20 million a year over 3 years. Going to be turning 38 middle of next season. Had a nice year for us, 290, 12 home runs, 60 ribbies, 106 OPS plus, respectable defensive shortstop, but hard to imagine that he will be back with us. But thank him for a good, solid year and a playoff appearance. Junior Marin, the young right fielder, I guess had a little bit of a bounce back year. You can see he put up a 124 OPS plus as a rookie, dipped to 89 last season, back to 116 this year as he upped his batting average to 267. Has good power, has hit 30, 27, and 28 homers in his 3 seasons with us. So he is headed into his arbitration years, expected to make just 1.8, 1.9 million this upcoming season. So certainly not a perfect player as a corner outfielder, but is very economical and still generally is a plus bat because of that good power. So have to imagine he will be playing a prominent role for us next year. Sal Frelick, similar to Jose, is someone we are locked up for a few more years on. You can see $9 million for each of the next 3 seasons, and then we've got team options for 2 years. He had kind of a down year for him. He's fragile. He seems like he's always banged up. Did have 528 at-bats, hit 269, 33 doubles, 6 homers, 34 steals, 97 OPS plus, 98 WRC plus, and just a 1.8 WAR. So definitely a down year for him. He's certainly capable of playing either of the corner outfield positions. More natural left fielder, given his average-ish arm. Has played center field for us in a pinch. But with the money that both Jose and Sal Frelick are making, I have a hard time believing we're going to bring back both of those people. I'm guessing Frelick, we probably don't have a ton of great options for either, but we'll take a look just at a high level to think about it. Actually, Frelick, there's a lot more, I wouldn't say a lot more interest, but there's somewhat more interest than there is for Jose. And, it doesn't look like at a very high level. It's just all old and overrated and overpaid players, although Zach Veen and Alexander Alberto, who we talked about with Jose, are both there on the offer list for Sal Frelick. But there's a little more interest in him. So, in an offseason filled with a lot of big decisions, getting rid of either Jose and or Frelick could free up even more money for us as we approach free agency if we really want to kind of totally revamp the direction that this Royals team is going. Or we could just dump those guys and use that money to try to bring back Bobby Whit Jr. And maybe even Spencer Bauer. I don't think we would go that route even if we had the money, but there are options out there. Ricardo Cabrera, second baseman, was up and down between Omaha and Kansas City this year. When we finally moved on from Shitong Kin, Cabrera fully kind of moved back into that second base spot where he was respectable, hitting 252, 87 OPS plus. You can see he is a plus defensive infielder. Not a great defensive infielder, but certainly a plus infielder. Can play second, third, and short for us. He's heading into his arbitration season. He's only going to make $1.2 million next year. So I think he will have a very important role on the team. In a perfect world, it would be as a utility infielder rather than our starting second baseman, but with the potential that we could be losing our longtime starter at third base in Bobby Witt Jr., and also losing our starting shortstop in Tim Anderson, it may be tough to kind of just backfill enough quality in the infield so that Cabrera is not back in a starting role next year, which is fine. He's an acceptable player, to be batting down at the end of the batting order, playing good defense for us, and pretty cost effective at that. Going back to the list, the last kind of key player to talk about is MJ Melendez, starting catcher, very good defensive catcher, great personality, good in the clubhouse. Had a brutal offensive season, hit just 204 with 13 homers in 422 at-bats, 72 OPS plus, only put up a 1.3 WAR. He, as I mentioned, We have a team option for this upcoming season at $12 million. He has been with us basically as long as Bobby Whit Jr. has. Since he hasn't put up the same glittering offensive line at Bobby Whit Jr., but a 110 OPS plus over the course of his career. The average season for him in 162 games, 24 homers, 78 runs driven in, 247 batting average, 4 WAR. So he has certainly been a solid offensive player for us and a very good defensive player for us, but he's been below average offensively 2 of the last 3 seasons, at least in terms of his OPS plus and WRC plus. That said, I'm leaning towards exercising the option. As I talked about, we've already got $55 million to spend, even with that $12 million tentatively on the books. And when we look to trade him, if we shop him around, there is a lot of interest in him. Not necessarily all great players, but I think with him, we want to keep the optionality to have him on staff or on the team this upcoming year because if we are competitive, he is an excellent defensive catcher. Looking at the contract extension, he's looking for that $12 million a year area going forward, which I guess we would consider paying him, although I think we are headed to a point where although he's going to be good defensively, his bat could be kind of falling off the cliff here, which is not optimal. Hasn't been an all-star since 2027. He was an all-star in 23 and 27. And we do have Angelo Bolden kind of nipping at his heels. Not as good defensively, good personality, but looks like Angelo Bolden is going to be a better hitter. He's only 23 years old. We brought him up in September to be backup, hit 235, but only over 17 at-bats, so a very small sample size, but he was our number 1 draft pick in 2025. Clearly want him to have a more significant role for us. Bolden has played first base in the past, but he's only 5'10". I guess you could put him at third if you had to, but he wouldn't be all that good there either. And his bat, I don't think, is so great that you're going to be looking for a spot for him in the lineup. But I think he does have the potential to be a decent offensive catcher. So he would be a great backup catcher, and I think he would be an acceptable starting catcher. But getting back to Melendez, the reason I'm going to exercise his option is that I do think for next season he's clearly better defensively. Want to keep a relatively popular player on the team with the potential to be losing several popular players this offseason already. And I think if things really go in the tank for the Royals, we could extract some value trading away Melendez as we approach the trade deadline next year. If we're not competitive, or if we've kind of moved on and decided that Bolden is our long-term answer, is our starting catcher, I think with a $12 million salary in just half of the season left, there will be teams that would be willing to give us something to take him on board. And as I mentioned, there's a chance that we extend him. I don't know that I would do it at $12 million a year, but if I could get him a little more reasonably than that, would think about extending him. So I'm actually going to make sure right now, actually the default is that if we don't do anything, that we... if we don't click on anything and don't do anything, they're just going to assume that we extended him, which is fine on the option year, but we are going to go and explicitly execute the option, avoid paying him the buyout. And as you can see, that didn't change our money for free agents and extensions at all, because the running assumption is that if you don't say something, you're just going to exercise the team option, so that was already in our numbers. Looking at the rest of our offensive players, we traded away Peyton Williams in the trade for Rafael Devers, which actually did not work out for us. Thought we kind of had a steal there, and Devers was not all that good offensively, hit just 210, did have 11 homers and 195 bats, but a league average-ish type offensive player. So we were obviously hoping for more when we traded for him. Also traded away Shitong Kin, as we've talked about in our last episode. We showed when he went to Colorado, hit just 229 for them. So unfortunately, he is a player who is just kind of hit a wall, even though he's only 25 years old, and looks like he is not the offensive player we thought he was going to be. So glad that we got that contract off of our books. Some other young players. Fabricio Valera was kind of a fourth outfielder for us this past year. Had 11 homers and 236 at-bats, so decent pop, but certainly not as productive as he was in Milwaukee last season. Jason Dominguez, Victor Rosa were only up a little bit, but Dominguez seems like he is trending towards not being a big part of our future, especially with Angelo Velasquez really developing quickly into a potential major league center fielder. Victor Rosa, I think, is still a player that potentially has a role for us as a utility infielder. He could be fighting with Cabrera to be a starting second baseman. The issue with him is that his arm just isn't as good. He's not as good defensively as Cabrera is, but it looks like he does actually have the potential to maybe have a slightly better bat. So Rosa is someone who we will continue to look at. Jordan Groshans was a utility infielder for us this year, but ended up pulling him off of the playoff roster. Still have him at a relatively high dollar amount for each of the next 2 years. Fortunately, the White Sox are paying 60% of that from when we picked him up. They wanted to dump out of that bad contract. But honestly, even us paying him, $3-ish million a year is not necessarily all that great for a guy who we only got 84 at-bats at the major league level. You can see he's an acceptable defensive infielder, can play third or short for us, could play second if we trained him there, and is a okay hitter. So there's value in him, particularly if we end up losing Bobby Whit Jr. and Tim Anderson. I tend to think we'll keep him around, but he's someone we could also look to move on from. Josh Young was not great for us, hit just 240 with 6 homers. Likely we'll be moving on from him. And then Jackson Chorio is a 26-year-old outfielder, didn't get much action at the major league level this year. Has been a pretty good hitter at Omaha, hitting 320 there in 2028, dropped to 260 last year, but back up to 336 at AAA this year. So a pretty good contact hitter, doesn't strike out all that much, can play a wide variety of positions, but primarily first base and corner outfield is where you'd be willing to play him. But he could have a role for us on the big league team next year, particularly if we do move on from a Frelick and or a Jose. So a lot of big decisions coming up this offseason as far as our offensive players in our everyday lineup. Have a lot of holes to fill with the players we have headed to free agency. The whole left side of our infield is going to need to be redone if we move on from Whit Jr. and Anderson, and also potentially going to have some holes in the outfield if we move on from Jose or Frelick. So will be a busy offseason, and we haven't even started talking about the pitching staff yet. And turning to that AL best pitching staff, the big decision is obviously what to do with Spencer Bauer, our longtime ace, won the Cy Young Award in 2027 when the Royals won the World Series, and had another really nice year for us, 12-7 record with a 2.88 ERA, 156 innings pitched. We've talked about a lot the fact that he is fragile. He's 30 years old now, so we have had him during the regular season on a 90 pitch count, just trying to kind of nurse him through these seasons after he was a bit injury prone in his first few years in the majors. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that. You can see we've got 34, 34, 33, and 32 starts from him the last 4 seasons. Now, granted, he's only even qualified for the ERA title twice in 27 and 28. But we've kept him healthy, and we've had him available for the playoffs when we kind of let the reins out a little bit and let him go 100 pitches in the playoffs. But we've kind of pieced together productivity from him. Honestly, if you got a fragile pitcher like him and you basically get 4 complete seasons out of him in a row, I think we've managed him the right way, even though 90 pitches is, extremely conservative. And you can see he's kind of, averaged 5-ish innings a start over those years. As I mentioned, he's 30 years old now. He's fragile. He's been fragile forever. And he's looking for $27.5 million a year for the next 7 years, taking him, up through his age 36 season. And he'll be 37 kind of by the end of that season. So it's going to be real tough for us to bring him back. Obviously, it will stink to lose a top of the rotation pitcher like Spencer Bauer that's came up through our organization. He's extremely popular locally, very popular nationally, so certainly going to take a hit when we move on from him. But I just don't think that this Royals team can afford to be spending $27 million for 7 years on a fragile pitcher in his 30s. I don't know that we can afford spending $35 million a year for the next 7 or so years on Bobby Whit Jr. either, but at least he's in the lineup every day. At least he's not fragile physically. I just don't think that Spencer Bauer contract is going to age well. Now, theoretically, with the money we have left, as I said, if we do move on from Frelick or Jose, we could theoretically bring back both Bauer and Bobby Whit Jr., and that would be basically spending all of the money we have available. But I just don't know if that's the right thing to do. That's obviously something I'm going to be thinking about hard in the coming days. Another pitcher who put up a WAR of over 4.0 is Caleb Loggerwell. Just a very solid starting pitcher. Went 12-10 this year, 3.56 ERA. You can see he is kind of Mr. Consistency over the course of his career. Last 3 years, 111, 114, and 117 ERA pluses. Over the course of his career, 113 ERA plus, 93 FIP minus, definitely a plus pitcher. Contract situation, starting to make a little more money, but 12, 14, and then a player option for 18. He's not Spencer Bauer, but you look at the money that we're going to be paying him the next 3 years compared to what we'd be paying for a Spencer Bauer, and expect that Loggerwell at the age of 28 is going to play a big role for us and could technically be our ace next season if we do move on from Bauer and don't replace him with another top-of-the-rotation guy. Tyler Bosma, another starting pitcher, 10-8, 3.59 ERA. Good, solid year for us. The left-hander is 31 years old. He is also fragile. You can see he's got really good stuff. His movement and control are kind of meh. Great changeup. His other 3 pitches are kind of meh. But despite those kind of, I don't want to say inconsistencies, but just the fact that he doesn't profile as an incredible pitcher, he's still been above average for us in the majors and close to 500 innings in the majors at this point with a 107 ERA plus and a 92 FIP minus. So certainly somebody that we're happy to keep around. I'm going to be making close to $2.5 million next year in arbitration, but particularly with the loss of Bauer looming, I think he will have a big role back in our rotation. Another starter, Zach Jacobs, had another nice year, 12-9, 4.17 ERA, walked the fewest people per 9 innings in the AL. He is also headed to arbitration, only going to make $1.2 million next year. Not a dominant pitcher. He's a control guy, needs to hit the corners. He can definitely give up some hits, but does not walk too many people. And, feel that if we have to move on from Bauer with Loggerwell, Bosma, and Jacobs, we've got 3 pretty good guys to kind of be key in our rotation, along with Gordon Graceffo, who we signed to an extension. We picked him up in the trade for Austin Roberts last year. Profiles is a bit above average major league pitcher. You can see he didn't actually get there this year. He was perfectly average in terms of his FIP minus at 100, a little below average in his ERA plus at 95. But we signed him to a $10 million extension for 4 years. We do have a team option on that last season. he's no Spencer Bauer by any stretch of the imagination, but my thought is with Loggerwell, Bosma, Jacobs, and Graceffo all signed up, we've got 4 positions in our starting rotation that we feel pretty good about. Would obviously love those guys to be 2, 3, 4, 5 rather than 1, 2, 3, and 4. But if those guys are the top 4 guys in our rotation, I think those are still 2 or 3 above average pitchers, 1 or 2 kind of average-ish pitchers. If we can find another guy to be an average-ish 5th starter, which we certainly have on the roster at this point, I think our rotation can still be a strength next year, even if it's potentially not the best rotation in the American League. Moving on to some of the bullpen guys, Ricky Venasqua, who had been a starter for us, initially moved into the closer role this year. You can see he saved 39 games for us, even though he did lose the closer job at the trade deadline when we made the trade to bring on, where is he? Luke Murphy. And Luke Murphy pitched really well for us, just 18 games, 12 saves in those 18 games, pitched 18 innings with a 2 ERA, but he's looking for big money, unlikely to be back with us next year. But Venasqua will be back with us next year. Contract's starting to get expensive for what he is. Would feel better if he's back in the rotation next year, if we're going to be spending $6.5 million a year on him. You can see he put up a 2.85 ERA primarily as a starter in 2028, 4.94 last year as a full-time starter, and then a 4.10 ERA this year coming out of the bullpen. The issue with him is just his control. He's an extreme ground ball pitcher, throws pretty hard, excellent stuff, excellent movement, not going to give up a ton of home runs. The walks are the issue with him. But I think Venasqua is likely to be back with us next year, playing a big role, and possibly could end up back in the rotation depending on what we do in the bullpen. RJ Dabovich has just been a really nice arm out of the bullpen for us for a long time. The issue is he's headed to free agency, and I think he's looking for decent money. Yeah, $7.5 million a year for 4 years. He's going to be 32 next year. He has really been a nice pitcher for us. You can see he's put up a 1.37 ERA plus and an 82 FIP minus over the course of his 7 seasons with the Royals. Has been an all-star 3 times as a middle reliever, so a very valuable pitcher. I don't know that the Royals want to be spending $7.5 million on a middle reliever, though, so we may have to move on from him. Will Goebel, important left-handed pitcher for this team, going to be making about $2.3 million in arbitration next year. He is a player who has started for us on occasion. Really nice year this past season, 11-3 record, 2 saves, 3.19 ERA. You can see he's kind of a vulture for wins. Started just 1 game back in 2028, and he got 18 wins. This past year was kind of similar. Started just 7 games and still got 11 wins. So he comes in, pitches some leveraged innings for us as a lefty out of the bullpen, and pitches pretty effectively. So we'll be happy to have Goebel back on the pitching staff next year. Already talked about Graceffo. Bryan Matoya is a guy who we picked up in the Rule 5 draft and had a solid year for us. 111 strikeouts and 89 1/3 innings pitched, 2.62 ERA. Going to be arbitration eligible, making about $2.5 million next year. He could be back with us. Also possible we'll move on from him. Will Bryan was a key loss to our bullpen. Another lefty who has played a pretty prominent role for us the last couple years. Was very effective this year with a 1.96 ERA in 46 innings, but basically missed half the season. Went out with a fractured elbow early in July. Still recovering from that. He is not even arbitration eligible yet because, we put him on the 60-day IL, so he really only has 2 years, 27 days of service. So he'll be back on a minimum contract next year, so we'll see what he looks like after that injury. Hopefully will still be effective. Jack Wiesenberger, who was a minor league signing before last season, has been a respectable pitcher for us out of the bullpen, someone who may make the team next year, may not make the team, but we've extracted pretty good value from him. We'll see. He's kind of, probably the 11th, 12th, 13th kind of pitcher on our 26-man roster, so he may or may not make the roster depending on how things evolve. I already talked about Luke Murphy. Bruce Zimmerman was another Rule 5 pickup for this team. Ended up pitching just 5 2/3 innings at the major league level this year, and then we moved on from him, but never really got a fair shake. He was injured on spring training. We rehabbed him down in Omaha and then pitched him for 2 games and then had somebody else coming off the injured list, so we moved on from him. Easton Twomis is a player who could potentially slot into that 5th starter role for us next year. Arbitration eligible, going to be making about $3.8 million. Picked him up in a trade with Colorado season and a half ago. He was fine this year, 3.79 ERA over 57 innings. A decent arm out of the bullpen. Probably makes a little bit much for what he is, but I do like the optionality that he's got the stamina and he's got 3 solid pitches and a changeup. I don't know what kind of changeup it is. Not quite major league average, but that gives him a 4th pitch. So he could start for us in a pinch. So he does have some value. Not a great year from him, but it's conceivable that he comes back. We traded away Aaron Ashby, and he's now in the minors. Wyatt Wendell and Bryce Hubbard are both players who split time between Omaha and Kansas City this past year. Looking at it was the last option year for Wyatt Wendell this year. And I think Hubbard may be in a similar situation. No, Hubbard still has 1 option year left, so Hubbard will certainly be back for us as kind of a 4A insurance policy guy next year. And then the last guy to mention is Mackenzie Gore, who could end up as a 4th or 5th starter for us potentially. Came back from some injuries this year, had a 4.18 ERA over 47 1/3 innings pitched. Lefty, a guy who can start for us in a pinch. We're paying him a little less than $2 million each of the next 2 years, or actually each of the next 2 years, and then a team option in 2033. So not an onerous contract, but a useful arm that has been really good for us at times in the past. So as I said, I feel like with Loggerwell, Bosma, Jacobs, and Graceffo, we've got 4 spots in the starting rotation figured out. And then when you look at the likes of Venasqua and Twomis and Mackenzie Gore, we definitely have a full 5-man pitching staff with some depth for injuries already put together, even if we move on from Bauer. It's not going to be as good as the pitching staff that we had with Bauer, obviously, but I think it's certainly a competent and above average major league staff, even if we don't add anyone into the rotation this offseason. The flip side of that, of course, is that it's a competent staff, and you wouldn't mind having Caleb Loggerwell on the mound in a key playoff game. But when you look at most of the rest of these guys, particularly when we get to the playoffs, a Bosma or a Jacobs or a Graceffo in, second, third, and fourth playoff games are likely to leave us at a disadvantage compared to the teams with the best pitching staffs with, frontline starters. So from that perspective, I don't know if Bauer's the right guy to bring back, but obviously if we could add a, number 1, number 2 kind of starter, that would be optimal. Certainly want to have as strong a pitching staff as we possibly can heading into the 2031 season. So turning now to some of the business stuff and some of the big decisions. You can see Devers and Murphy, no potential compensation there. Got a wide load of free agents with potential compensation. Certainly going to make a qualifying offer to Spencer Bauer and Bobby Whit Jr. As I mentioned, it's possible over the next couple of weeks before we get to free agency, we'll think about bringing one or both of them back. Tim Anderson, RJ Dabovich, and Josh Young, certainly not going to submit qualifying offers there because I don't want to be spending close to $19 million on either of those guys next year. But I guess if we do move on from Bauer and Bobby Whit Jr. this offseason, we should get some pretty good draft pick compensation in return for the two of them. And we've kind of talked through a lot of these players as we kind of reviewed the 2030 season. So I think our decisions on the arbitration-eligible players are pretty easy. Zach Jacobs definitely could have a prominent role for us in the roster next year. Looking for a 9-year extension at close to $17 million a year. I like him as a pitcher. I don't love him that much. He's only been up for 3 years and a day, so we've still got him under arbitration control for a few years. Team offer is only expected to be $1.2 million. I'm just going to offer him a 1-year arbitration deal, see if we can sign him for $1.1 million. Not even close. How about $11.50? He's willing to think about that. So we will get, hopefully, Jacobs signed up for next year. Bosma, we also talked about him. Another respectable pitcher for us, like the fact that he's a lefty. He's only looking for a 1-year deal at $2.64 million. We're expected to offer about $2.2. Going to just try to get him signed for the 1-year deal. Let's see if he will go for $2.1 million. Not going to get it done, so we're going to have to go a little higher on him also. We're going to have to offer him kind of the full team amount, it looks like. Not even. Have to offer him a little more than the team amount, but would like to avoid going to arbitration. This is weird. It's taken a long time to get him here. At $2.3 million, so a little more than we thought he was worth as a team option, or with the team offer compared to his request going into arbitration. But always like to try to get these players signed up before going into arbitration to potentially get the bump in fan interest from re-signing these guys to 1-year contracts, and then also just a little more certainty as we get these guys signed into what our budget looks like. And then you also avoid the, I don't know if there's technically an arbitration taint that is on from when you have to go to a hearing and the team kind of says all the bad things about the player, but it would be kind of cool if there was something like that in the game, and we'll imagine that there is. So that's one more reason to avoid arbitration, at least in the back of my mind. Will Goebel, we talked about, like the lefty arm here. $2.3 million is kind of where we think he's headed in arbitration. He's looking for $2.7. We'll try to see if we can sign him for a little less at $2.2 million. He's willing to think about that. So another pitcher locked up. Bryan Matoya, the 33-year-old, I don't know if we're going to make an offer to him in arbitration. $2.6 million. He's going to be 34 next year. He's been a... he did a solid job for us as a Rule 5 pickup last year. As I mentioned, more than a solid job, honestly, with a 2.62 ERA over 89 innings pitched. He's looking for $3.2 million, though. We want to offer him about 2.6 or 2.4. I'm not sure about him, quite honestly. We'll give him some thought, but as a guy who's going to be 34 years old next year, I don't know that I want to be spending $2.5–3 million a year on him. I almost think if we could get RJ Dabovich back for less than the $7.5 million that he's looking for, that's something I'd kind of prefer for a right-handed middle reliever. Dabovich is better. He's more proven. He's younger than Matoya. So Matoya is a decision. Easton Twomis, I think, is going to end up overpaid. I do like his versatility, being able to both start and come out of the pen. He was not as good as Matoya with a 3.79 ERA over 57 innings pitched, but he's only 26 years old, and he does have that ability to start. Arbitration number for him expected to be about 3.8. He's probably looking for over 4. We're certainly not going to pay him. Ooh, he's not even interested, in the right mood to discuss negotiations. So I guess we'll just have to see what the 3.8 looks like for him, or maybe he'll feel better in a couple weeks and want to talk to us. I guess he's angry that he's not in the rotation. Ricky Venasqua, contract for him is getting expensive. $6.5 million is a lot for what he is over the course of his career. He's been an above-average pitcher. You can see 111 ERA plus, 90 FIP minus. Would like to have him back. He's 32 years old now, not somebody that we're going to be looking to make a long-term deal with, even though he may be looking for. No, he's actually not, but he's looking for $8.7 million. Yeah, there's no way that we're going to go there. If we can get him around that 6.5 figure, maybe a little less, I think we'd bring him back, but I don't know if he's going to go for that. He's got some pretty unrealistic expectations in terms of arbitration. Let's see what he thinks about a $6.4 million deal. Yeah, we'll give you a bonus if you're a Cy Young Award winner or an All-Star. I don't think that's going to happen. He's willing to think about that one-year deal, so have Venasqua locked up. Ricardo Cabrera, as I mentioned, he could have in a perfect world, he would be a utility infielder for us. It's conceivable he's going to be a starting second baseman or third baseman, or I guess possibly even a starting shortstop for us next year. So we want to get him signed. Don't want to spend a ton of money on him. Hopefully we can get him for $1.15 million next season. Yeah, make the offer to him. And then last but not least, Junior Marin, as we've talked about, corner outfielder. Would feel better if he was kind of a fourth outfielder for us. He's been a good bat at the major league level, though, with the exception of last season. Got good power. Definitely someone we would happily have on the team next year. Looking for close to $1.8 million. He's interesting to let us buy out some of those arbitration years and free agent years. So it would be a 6-year contract with some team options at an average of just $4 million a year. So that's letting us buy out 3 free agency years. Let me just double check that to make sure. Looking at Junior Marin, if I can find him. Yeah, because this year is 2030, so we're heading into his 3 arbitration years where he's expected to make about $2 million, $3.5 million, and then $4.5 million. So being able to buy out those arbitration years for him, as well as some free agency years at a lower level, is kind of interesting. As I mentioned, I think on a good team, he's a fourth outfielder. I freely admit that. But he can play a competent left or right, and he's got good home run power. He's proven at the major league level at this point, 1,500 at-bats, 109 OPS plus, 106 WRC plus. He's proven to be a bit above average offensive player, one of the few true power bats we have on the team. Don't love the fact that he's fragile. I'm torn on this one. I don't know that I want to be paying him even $4 million a year on average, and certainly those $5.5 million figures for those free agent years are getting, I don't want to say high because it's $5.5 million a year, which for a Major League Baseball player is nothing exceptional. In a perfect world, though, as I've talked about, he's a fourth outfielder, maybe a fifth outfielder for us. I think I'm just going to offer him a 1-year deal right now. It's good to know that he's potentially interested in a longer-term deal with us. Maybe we can lock him up down the line if we decide that's the right thing to do. I just don't know that I want to make a 6-year commitment to him at this point, even if that not extreme kind of money. I just don't know that I want $4 or $5 million a year tied up in a player who could conceivably become a fifth outfielder for us. I think we can probably replace a good part of his production with a AAA player as a fourth or fifth outfielder in most cases. We're not going to have the same kind of power, but he's not a perfect player. So let's see if we can just get him signed to a 1-year deal at $1.7 million. Disappointed in that. 1.8 he's willing to think about. So we've got offers out there to everyone except Easton Twomis, who doesn't want to talk with us, and Bryan Matoya, who we may move on from. So hopefully we have proactively tackled the arbitration situations, and obviously going forward, we've got to give some serious thought to what we're going to do with Spencer Bauer, what we're going to do with Whit Jr. Tim Anderson, I think, is too expensive. RJ Dabovich is too expensive right now, but we'll be potentially exploring a more reasonable deal for him. Don't think Josh Young is coming back. I don't imagine he's looking for a ton of money. Oh, actually, he is. He's looking for $9 million a year. Yeah, Josh Young is definitely not coming back, but also not going to make a qualifying offer to him. So that is it as far as a summary of how the Royals players all ended up performing over the 2030 season. Kind of a high-level plan for what we want to accomplish this offseason. Obviously, in our next episode, we're going to have to dig in and kind of figure out, are we going to make an offer to Whit Jr.? Are we going to make an offer to Spencer Bauer? What are we going to do with RJ Dabovich? And we'll start seeing, the arbitration eligible players come in and what their numbers look like and what our payroll looks like. And then we're also going to need to figure out what to do with the likes of Luis Jose and Sal Frelick, who are in line to make some pretty decent money over the next several years, and maybe guys that we look to move on from. I guess the last thing before we finish up this episode is just to take an initial look at who the potential free agents are this offseason. You can see Spencer Bauer highlights the whole list of pitchers who are available. Actually, this is kind of interesting. You look at this. This tells you all you need to know about the Kansas City pitching staff that we've had in recent years. Looking at the free agents on the pitching side that are available: Spencer Bauer, current Royal; Reed Gallimon, former Royal; Luke Murphy, current Royal; Austin Roberts, former Royal. We've had a lot of talent on our pitching staff, and 4 of the top 6 pitchers, at least just in terms of their ratings, are players who were on the Royals over the last few seasons. Check in on Austin Roberts and see what he did in his year with Milwaukee, where he ended up making $16.9 million, which was more than we wanted to be paying a 31, 32-year-old closer. Had a solid season, 3.55 ERA, 101 strikeouts in 66 innings, led the league with 50 saves, so a 1.17 ERA plus, a 60 FIP minus, so really good there, 2.2 WAR, so another nice year for Austin Roberts. Be interesting to see what he's looking for as a free agent next year. Looks like his demand might only be around $14 million. So there are potentially some very interesting players on the pitching side. Starters, it's a little slimmer pickings, though, not surprisingly. Bauer headlines the things. 37-year-old Aaron Nola, who's fragile. He's going to be looking for big money, likely. Anderson Paulino. Jorge Rodriguez, supposedly, at least according to our scout, has a little bit of potential to get better. 28 years old. Oof. Not a great profile. Really nice stuff and a great changeup, but the rest of it is pretty meh. But if he's a reasonable enough request, someone to think about. But doesn't look like there's any real game-changing starting pitchers out there. Anderson Paulino, I guess, would be one to think about. Coming off kind of a down year with the Cubs, 88 ERA plus, 90 FIP minus, and he's supposedly going to be looking for about $23 million. So, and these guys are all fragile, as you can see. So honestly, if we want a frontline starting pitcher, it's probably going to be bringing Bauer back. As I've talked about, I don't want to be giving him $27.5 million-ish a year for 7 years. If we could maybe, before he gets to free agency, sign him for a shorter contract with somewhat less value, that may be the way to go if we really decide that we need a kind of frontline starter for this staff next year. Looking at the available batters, a lot more players to kind of think about out there. Yener Fernandez, catcher. Not that great defensively, but a really nice bat. Just doesn't really have a defensive position to play, and we're pretty happy at DH with Vasquez. Bobby Whit Jr., as we've talked about, going to be out there. Riley Green in right field. Our shortstop Tim Anderson out there, and then Eloy Jimenez. Those are kind of the top players as far as their current ratings who are headed out there. And then you can see a lot of veterans: Nolan Arenado, Javi Baez, Alec Baum, Matt Chapman, J.P. Crawford, Devers, Ty France, Aaron Judge, Kyle Lewis, Nicky Lopez, Josh Lowe, Sean Murphy, Brandon Nimmo, so Tyler Soderstrom, Trevor Story, a lot of kind of familiar veteran names that are going to be out there. So there will be guys who we could potentially sign to one-year contracts if we need to kind of fill those gaps at third base or shortstop. Riley Green in the outfield, probably the most interesting bat. Looking at what he's done over the course of his career, 128 OPS plus, 125 WRC plus. So he would be a really nice upgrade in the outfield compared to Jose or Frelick offensively. You know, the issue is he's supposedly going to be looking for like $32 million a year. So when we've got Jose at around 13 plus million and Frelick at 9 million, you know, we're committing, you know, close to 20 million additional dollars, even if we trade away one of those guys and we decide to trade after Riley Green as a free agent. So, not the most impressive free agent class ever. And honestly, a lot of Royals are kind of current Royals or former Royals are some of the key players that are going to be out there. So we've got a lot to think about as to whether we potentially want to preemptively give an offer to Whit Jr. and or Spencer Bauer before they even get to free agency, and lock them up that way, and then maybe have a less active free agency chasing after players who aren't on our team. So we will focus on all of those decisions in our next episode. If you've got thoughts on what we should do, what we shouldn't do, would absolutely love to hear them down below. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.